Father sold his obese girl to a mountain man for being too dark, but he had shocking plans. Pour yourself a warm cup of coffee and prepare your heart for the most powerful story of divine purpose and family restoration ever told in the American frontier. This tale will take you through paternal abandonment, mountain sanctuary, and the triumph of love over prejudice, proving that sometimes God's greatest plans unfold through those society deems least worthy. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories where divine providence conquers the darkest circumstances. Prepare for this inspiring journey of healing, community building, and the miracle of chosen family. Wind River Range, Wyoming Territory, brutal winter, 1886. When Tom Lark sold his daughter Junior for being too dark to marry to mountain man Luther Cross for a rusted rifle, he never imagined he was delivering her into God's perfect plan for healing both her wounded heart and an entire community of forgotten children. She was Junior Lark, 16, and rejected a mixed heritage girl whose father's cruelty had crushed her spirit, but not her capacity for love. He was Luther Cross, 42, and devoted a mountain guardian whose promise to her deceased mother would transform abandonment into divine purpose. Their unlikely bond would unfold through one transformative year of healing and growth, proving that sometimes God's most beautiful families are created through the most painful circumstances when love chooses purpose over prejudice. Wyoming Territory in 1886 was harsh frontier where racial prejudice created systematic abandonment of mixed heritage children, while Native American healing traditions provided wisdom that conventional medicine couldn't offer during epidemic outbreaks requiring traditional knowledge. Mountain settlements provided sanctuary for society's outcasts, while legal documentation of Native American treaty rights could protect established healing grounds when systematic persecution threatened vulnerable communities requiring divine intervention. Orphaned children of various ethnic backgrounds faced systematic persecution, while religious calling toward service could be fulfilled through community sanctuary when isolated locations enabled authentic ministry, transcending denominational restrictions. Corporate interests threatened established homesteads, while legal recognition of inheritance rights required documentation and community testimony when fraudulent claims challenged legitimate ownership of sacred healing grounds requiring professional legal intervention for protection. 16-year-old Junior had inherited mother's healing knowledge while enduring systematic rejection based on mixed heritage, created authentic understanding of outcast experience when personal suffering had enabled empathy for vulnerable children requiring maternal protection. Her experience with racial persecution while preserving spiritual strength had developed exceptional nurturing abilities when Mountain Sanctuary would reveal natural gifts for caregiving and community leadership through service to abandoned children. Despite vulnerable position as abandoned daughter and racial outcast, she possessed genuine healing wisdom and spiritual maturity that mountain ministry would reveal when safe environment enabled authentic character development through caring for society's forgotten children. 42-year-old Luther had established Mountain Sanctuary after personal tragedy, while promise to deceased Native American healer Wah had created commitment to protecting her daughter despite unconventional family formation requiring community understanding. His experience with frontier survival, while spiritual calling toward service, had developed protective instincts for vulnerable individuals when mountain isolation had preserved commitment to healing ministry despite personal loss and social isolation. Despite rugged mountain lifestyle and isolated circumstances, he possessed authentic pastoral heart and healing wisdom that caring for abandoned children would fulfill when shared purpose created opportunity for family formation through chosen bonds transcending biological relationships. Their relationship faces systematic racial persecution, while corporate land theft threatens their healing sanctuary, requiring legal documentation and community testimony when individual protection proves insufficient against coordinated attack on vulnerable mixed-heritage family and healing ministry. Luther's acceptance of Junior through promised protection created immediate sanctuary from paternal abandonment while recognizing spiritual calling to fulfill sacred commitment to deceased mother, requiring comprehensive healing ministry for vulnerable children. Junior's gradual understanding of divine purpose, while her healing abilities found expression, created restoration environment that abandonment trauma had prevented through paternal rejection, requiring patient rebuilding of faith and self-worth. Physical safety was established through respectful mountain family arrangements, while collaborative healing ministry created partnership that conventional family structures couldn't match, when spiritual calling enabled authentic relationship development without exploitation. Neither expected romantic feelings to develop when Luther's parental protection, while Junior's grateful service created natural family dynamic, despite unconventional origins, requiring community understanding rather than continued systematic persecution. Luther's consistent Christian kindness, while Junior's exceptional healing abilities and spiritual maturity created mountain sanctuary that both individuals needed when isolation provided opportunity for authentic spiritual family development without social pressure. Trust developed through Luther's mountain expertise, while Junior's inherited healing knowledge created comprehensive community service that individual efforts couldn't achieve when spiritual calling required collaborative resource management for successful healing ministry. Junior's recognition of Mother's legacy, while Luther's commitment to sacred promise, created mutual understanding about divine purpose that abandonment trauma had temporarily obscured through paternal betrayal when spiritual healing required authentic family bonds. Their collaboration during healing crises and property maintenance while managing healing sanctuary created opportunities for authentic spiritual relationship development based on shared ministry rather than conventional family expectations. Physical comfort evolved through appropriate family caregiving and shared spiritual responsibilities, with both experiencing chosen family connection that previous abandonment had prevented when mountain environment enabled authentic relationship development without judgment. The breakthrough occurred when community persecution, while legal threats created crisis, requiring their combined spiritual witness and community testimony when individual resistance proved insufficient against coordinated attack on healing ministry requiring divine intervention. Junior's traumatic parental abandonment made trust difficult, while Luther's grief over previous losses created emotional barriers when both needed healing time that external persecution threatened to prevent through systematic legal and social pressure. Tom Lark's fraudulent claims created external threat, while bounty hunters' systematic harassment required legal resistance that individual families couldn't provide through conventional defensive measures requiring professional legal intervention. Most challenging was community racial prejudice about mixed heritage family, while legal system demanded conventional explanations for relationship that defied traditional categories requiring creative legal and spiritual solutions. Corporate conspiracy against healing sanctuary created survival pressure, while legal manipulation threatened to eliminate Native American treaty rights, requiring immediate response that individual resources couldn't provide when systematic exploitation needed collective spiritual resistance rather than individual defensive measures for successful community protection. Through months of mountain healing ministry, Luther's protective guidance while Junior's inherited healing wisdom created comprehensive spiritual community that conventional families couldn't achieve when combined spiritual experience enabled both individual healing and community ministry for abandoned children. Their coordination during healing crises while managing sanctuary responsibilities created natural spiritual partnership that traditional family arrangements couldn't match when shared ministerial duty enabled mutual respect and authentic chosen family bonding, transcending conventional categories. Most significantly, their relationship demonstrated that chosen spiritual family could provide superior healing ministry rather than biological arrangements when authentic calling transcended social categories for achieving comprehensive spiritual service and mutual fulfillment. The transformation occurred when Junior's mother's healing wisdom, while Luther's mountain sanctuary created gradual recognition that spiritual ministry provided authentic community service when individual healing demonstration overcame systematic prejudice about mixed heritage families. Their participation in community spiritual support while maintaining healing dignity created slow acceptance that alternative family arrangements provided community benefit when individual spiritual service challenged existing social categories and racial prejudices. Their most profound growth involved learning to serve spiritual community while defending chosen family bonds when both required courage for protecting vulnerable ministry arrangement despite social pressure demanding conventional family categories. Junior's discovery of mother's treaty rights, while Luther's understanding of legal documentation created opportunity for sanctuary protection that individual research couldn't achieve when combined knowledge enabled legal defense against corporate conspiracy. Their systematic use of community spiritual allies while maintaining legal standing created resistance network that corporate exploitation couldn't overcome when authentic spiritual relationships provided foundation for collective defense and legal protection. Most importantly, their chosen family demonstrated that spiritual calling could enable community ministry rather than individual focus when shared divine purpose transcended personal concerns for achieving collective spiritual welfare and legal heritage protection. Spiritual community survival became threatened when corporate land speculation created systematic persecution, while bounty hunters created physical danger, requiring immediate spiritual resistance that individual families couldn't provide through conventional defensive measures. Legal complications emerged when fraudulent paternal claims, while systematic document manipulation created potential family separation through coordinated legal attack, requiring professional intervention and federal oversight. Professional investigation became necessary when corporate conspiracy attracted territorial attention, while systematic fraud required expert detection that local authorities couldn't provide through conventional investigation methods requiring federal intervention. Most dangerously, bounty hunters' coordination with corrupt officials, while their systematic intimidation required elimination of spiritual resistance before corporate takeover could be completed successfully through violent family elimination. Religious authority became involved when spiritual community moral crisis demanded pastoral leadership, while systematic persecution required collective Christian response that individual families couldn't coordinate without church organization and mutual support. Legal pressure intensified when fraudulent inheritance claims, while corporate manipulation created artificial family crisis, requiring immediate spiritual community action for successful resistance against organized conspiracy requiring divine intervention. Junior's evolution from abandoned daughter to spiritual community leader reflected authentic healing ministry's triumph over racial persecution. while crisis revealed leadership strength that paternal abandonment had temporarily suppressed when community survival required genuine rather than performed spiritual response. Her willingness to risk personal safety for spiritual community welfare showed growth from individual survival to healing ministry leadership, when others' welfare required courage, despite potential retaliation from corporate forces threatening entire spiritual community. Luther learned that mountain ministry required community engagement, while systematic corporate threats demanded choosing collective spiritual resistance over individual security, when authentic pastoral calling required personal risk for spiritual community protection. Together, they discovered that chosen spiritual family provided superior foundation for healing ministry rather than creating individual focus when shared. Divine purpose enabled effective resistance against external threats, requiring collective action for successful protection against systematic corporate conspiracy, targeting vulnerable healing sanctuary through fraudulent legal manipulation. The crisis exploded when bounty hunters' systematic persecution, while corrupt Sheriff Morton's cooperation, created simultaneous legal and spiritual emergency, threatening to separate chosen family and eliminate healing sanctuary through coordinated corporate conspiracy requiring desperate spiritual resistance. This half-breed girl and those mongrel children have no legal standing, Tom Lark declared while presenting fraudulent documentation to territorial authorities. And this mountain hermit's illegal sanctuary threatens community safety, requiring immediate family separation and child placement in proper Christian institutions. Junior's recognition that spiritual community survival required public testimony, while her mixed heritage might eliminate credibility, created devastating choice between personal safety and spiritual warfare, when authentic healing ministry leadership demanded risking individual reputation despite vulnerability. The situation felt catastrophic when violent separation, while systematic legal corruption, created existential threat that conventional resistance couldn't overcome, when corporate authority seemed to control both physical violence and legal system despite fraudulent documentation. Most crushing was immediate recognition that chosen family acceptance had finally occurred, while corporate elimination threatened to destroy authentic spiritual relationships that racial prejudice had prevented, but healing ministry had enabled through mutual respect and shared divine purpose. Unable to remain silent while witnessing systematic spiritual community destruction, Junior battled between self-protection instincts and healing ministry obligation, when public testimony might expose her to corporate retaliation, but silence would enable collective spiritual destruction. Her recognition that mixed heritage was less important than spiritual community survival, while authentic faith required moral courage, created understanding that individual safety was secondary to collective healing. Ministry welfare requiring personal risk despite vulnerability. She used community prayer relationships and inherited healing wisdom to organize spiritual resistance while preparing for legal testimony that might provide divine authority necessary for successful community defense, when authentic spiritual voice could challenge corporate propaganda. Unable to protect chosen daughter while facing systematic spiritual community elimination through corporate conspiracy, Luther confronted choice between individual sanctuary security and collective spiritual warfare, when mountain isolation couldn't provide adequate protection against organized persecution. His growing understanding that authentic chosen family required community engagement, while individual survival depended on collective spiritual resistance, created recognition that personal safety was connected to spiritual community welfare, requiring shared divine risk. Most difficult was accepting community pastoral role while maintaining protective instincts, when collective spiritual action required risking personal resources and safety. despite preference for mountain independence and individual ministry requiring external spiritual support. When Junior chose public spiritual leadership, while Luther supported community healing ministry resistance despite personal risk, authentic divine courage triumphed over systematic intimidation when spiritual authority enabled effective resistance against corporate conspiracy. Their alliance as spiritual community protectors rather than individual survivors marked triumph of collective healing ministry welfare over personal safety, while proving that authentic spiritual leadership could overcome systematic corruption when divine truth provided foundation for successful spiritual resistance. The climactic courtroom confrontation required entire community to witness ultimate spiritual warfare, while Junior's courageous testimony and authenticated treaty documentation provided comprehensive proof of divine intervention versus corporate conspiracy when collective spiritual witness proved stronger than individual persecution. Standing together before Territorial Judge Blackstone, while presenting documented evidence of legitimate inheritance and spiritual calling, Junior and Luther represented triumph of authentic healing ministry over corporate conspiracy when divine providence proved superior to systematic persecution. Every attack against our healing sanctuary represents spiritual warfare designed to eliminate God's work. Junior testified while presenting Mother's authentic treaty rights documentation, and legitimate healing ministry requires protecting established sanctuary rights rather than enabling corporate exploitation through manufactured legal proceedings against vulnerable healing community. Luther's testimony demonstrated pastoral character. Individual mountain ministry, combined with community healing service, represents authentic spiritual development rather than corporate exploitation when genuine believers create lasting healing through mutual support rather than systematic elimination of spiritual witness. Community witnesses, including Grateful Families and Pastor Whitmore, provided comprehensive testimony about spiritual transformation, while systematic corporate fraud demonstrated character evidence that false accusations couldn't eliminate through violence or legal manipulation. Most importantly, their successful defense established territorial precedent for recognizing spiritual community rights through divine intervention, while demonstrating that authentic healing ministry could overcome corporate conspiracy when collective spiritual resistance provided foundation for divine protection. Judge Blackstone's ruling, while territorial recognition of Native American treaty rights provided framework that corporate conspiracy couldn't overcome when authentic spiritual cooperation transcended racial boundaries through documented divine providence. Their successful spiritual victory influenced Wyoming territorial approaches to religious freedom and healing ministry while establishing framework for protecting spiritual communities when serving collective territorial development rather than enabling systematic persecution through fraudulent corporate authority. Tom Lark's legal defeat, while community recognition of authentic spiritual family represented triumph of divine healing ministry over corporate conspiracy, when territorial protection enabled individual achievement despite systematic fraud and intimidation attempts. Community celebration of chosen family bonds, while territorial support for healing ministry created environment where individual spiritual achievement would enhance rather than threaten collective welfare through continued healing community leadership. Spiritual blessing of chosen family formation, while pastoral authority, recognition of divine calling provided foundation for lasting relationship stability when authentic Christian love had enabled effective community protection rather than individual advancement. Junior's continued healing ministry leadership, while family partnership with Luther enabled expanded territorial spiritual service through proven healing character rather than corporate manipulation when collaborative relationship served broader territorial healing welfare. Their rebuilt healing sanctuary, designed to provide spiritual community gathering center while maintaining prosperous healing operation, became territorial model for inclusive spiritual development that honored both individual achievement and collective healing welfare. Luther's restoration to community healing ministry, while Junior's development as territorial spiritual advocate, demonstrated that authentic chosen family could enhance rather than limit individual potential when genuine spiritual partnership provided foundation for healing community leadership. Most significantly, their family had evolved from abandonment situation to authentic healing community partnership that proved genuine spiritual relationships could provide superior foundation for territorial healing development when collaborative ministry transcended individual advancement. Junior and Luther's happiness was visible to everyone who observed their transformation in their effective healing community leadership and authentic chosen family bonds, their inclusive approach to territorial spiritual development, and their shared commitment to demonstrating that healing ministry mattered more than racial appearance. Their successful resistance to corporate conspiracy influenced territorial approaches to healing ministry protection while establishing framework for recognizing authentic spiritual community development through divine intervention rather than corporate authority when serving collective healing welfare. Spiritual impact spread through their inclusive healing methods, while their experience became model for territorial settlements seeking effective approaches to corporate conspiracy requiring collective spiritual resistance rather than individual defensive measures. Legal precedents from their case helped establish territorial framework for healing ministry freedom that recognized spiritual community authority over systematic exploitation while supporting healing sanctuary protection when serving healing development rather than corporate manipulation. Their story became teaching example throughout Wyoming Territory about effective spiritual resistance while demonstrating how authentic healing leadership could overcome corporate conspiracy when collective spiritual action transcended individual survival for achieving territorial healing justice. Healing community development followed their model of cooperative spiritual protection while building comprehensive approaches to corporate oversight that welcomed authentic healing service rather than enabling systematic persecution through fraudulent corporate authority. Territorial authorities recognized their resistance as example of appropriate spiritual response to corporate fraud, while their continued territorial prosperity influenced territorial policies supporting healing ministry protection over corporate exploitation. Their advocacy work influenced territorial legislation regarding healing ministry freedom and community protection, while their sanctuary remained model for territorial regions seeking effective approaches to healing development that honored both individual achievement and collective spiritual welfare. 20 years later, Wyoming statehood healing ministry laws included comprehensive spiritual community protection and fraud prevention provisions that historians trace directly to precedents established by their successful resistance to systematic corporate persecution. Their healing community traditions continued demonstrating successful cooperative spiritual development for 4 generations, with residents learning that authentic healing ministry transcended racial appearance, while their story remained inspiration for choosing spiritual community welfare over systematic corporate manipulation. Within 1 year of their legal victory, 3 other Wyoming Territory communities successfully established healing sanctuary communities inspired by Junior and Luther's model of choosing collective spiritual resistance over individual submission. when systematic persecution required healing community cooperation rather than individual defensive measures. Their approach became regional example of spiritual community resilience, while demonstrating that corporate conspiracy could be overcome through authentic healing leadership and divine intervention, rather than individual submission to systematic intimidation and legal manipulation. Healing benefits spread as their cooperative spiritual methods influenced territorial policies supporting healing ministry freedom, while their experience attracted territorial attention to corporate fraud, requiring investigation rather than territorial tolerance. Their story influenced territorial healing customs by proving that authentic spiritual calling could overcome racial prejudice when supported by collective spiritual community acceptance, rather than individual religious positioning requiring systematic exclusion of mixed heritage believers. Their healing community protection influenced territorial legislation, preventing corporate healing ministry persecution, while establishing comprehensive framework for recognizing authentic spiritual development through divine intervention rather than corporate authority when serving collective healing welfare. Spiritual programs based on their inclusive healing methods influenced territorial approaches to healing community development, while their experience became model for settlements throughout American West, seeking effective responses to corporate conspiracy requiring collective rather than individual spiritual solutions. Legal precedents from their case helped establish territorial framework for healing ministry freedom that recognized spiritual community cooperation advantages while supporting authentic healing leadership when serving territorial healing development rather than corporate manipulation. Their successful spiritual cooperation influenced federal approaches to territorial healing oversight, while demonstrating that healing community unity could enhance rather than threaten individual prosperity when authentic spiritual service provided superior outcomes to systematic persecution. 25 years later, Wyoming healing organizations included comprehensive corporate oversight and healing community protection programs that officials traced directly to precedents established by their successful choice of collective spiritual resistance over individual submission. Their relationship evolved from abandonment situation to authentic healing. Family partnership characterized by mutual support and deepening spiritual commitment that impressed territorial residents and healing leaders alike. Both individuals' transformation from racial outcasts to respected healing community leaders while building chosen family demonstrated healing power of divine purpose over racial prejudice. They built extended healing community, understanding that authentic family transcended racial boundaries, while their sanctuary became model for territorial settlements that valued collective healing welfare alongside individual achievement. In later years, both remained devoted healing leaders whose partnership continued inspiring others. True family bonds are created through divine purpose rather than biological connection or racial similarity, proving that God's most beautiful families emerge when hearts choose healing ministry over society's prejudices. If this story of divine purpose and healing sanctuary warmed your heart, like this video. Subscribe for more inspiring frontier spiritual dramas and share your thoughts below. Sometimes God's perfect plans come through society's most painful rejections, and the most beautiful healing communities are built by those who prove that divine calling transcends every prejudice. Here's to all the chosen families who discovered that authentic love creates God's kingdom on earth through choosing healing ministry over racial barriers.